Hey everybody, welcome back to the Graveyard Shit podcast. We are doing something a little interesting today. We are covering Halloween 2 and Halloween Kills. Interesting interesting choices to say the least. Um yeah. So I'm at it, guys.
Well, why don't we start off by just telling everyone where you can find us? Lonnie, go ahead.
Yeah.
Uh, my YouTube channel is called Mr. Macabre's Movie Library. Just go on to YouTube and just look that up. Or if you're interested in 4K Blu-ray reviews, I used to have a channel, Terror and Tats. You can check that out. But yeah, my current working YouTube channel right now is Mr. Macabre's Movie Library.
Nice.
Glenn?
Me, you can find me on YouTube at BDG Reviews, as well as on Graveyard Shit Podcast, and well as on Body Bags episodes. We put every now and then, every couple of weeks, every month, whatever.
At least once a month, right?
Yeah. We don't do the daily episodes anymore, but I think we've been doing pretty good with what we've been putting up. People seem to have been enjoying it, so
they're stacking up.
They are.
Well, that just tells you how fast time's flying, which is scary. So,
yeah, true.
All right, you can find me at VHS82 apostrophe, my YouTube channel, and Letterbox VHS82, the Graveyard Ship podcast, and our Body Bags roundtable discussion things that we've been doing almost this one week, and then that other thing the next week usually is kind of what we're sort of falling into, which works. Yeah. So real quick, Lonnie, what's like the last thing you've done that might be of interest? Well, physical media matters, right? Or why you think physical media? What was the title of that again?
You mean the last video I just did?
No, the one where you talked about why you think physical media is going to be around for a while. That was like just a couple back.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact name of the video, but yeah, it's like, you go on YouTube and you see so many people doing all these videos and stuff like that, and they're always talking about like, oh my God, is this the end of physical media? Is that the end of physical media? Are we going to run out? And all this kind of stuff. And it's all like, where I'm living here in Tucson, I have a bookstore. There are two big stores that we go to, if you want to look for physical media, movies, movies, books, vinyl, all the kind of stuff. We have two big stores here. And it's baffling to me whenever people are, I keep seeing these, scare tactic, fear monger YouTube videos where they're like, oh my God, this is it. I think we're coming to the end. We're going to lose out and, they're going to stop making this stuff. And it's all like, if you guys see what I see, whenever I go into these stores, it's like, no. If anything, it's in the opposite direction. It's like, no, movies are selling huge. I mean, okay, yeah, streaming is the highest thing, but trust me, no, people are buying movies. I go in there, it's like I see people walking around all the time with stacks of movies. I see them buying vinyl records. I'm seeing them buy books. Video games, you name it, they're buying it. As a matter of fact, it was a few days ago, my local record store, Zia Records. Now, they did what they called Record Store Day. And one of the things that they did was, they brought in all these records that you couldn't pre-order them, or you couldn't, you couldn't get them online, you couldn't pre-order them, any of that kind of stuff. You had to go in on record day to pick these up, otherwise you didn't get them. There were a couple of ones that I wanted to get. One of them was the vinyl for the Top Secret soundtrack, especially because, Val Kilmer just passed away and stuff like that. And I love the movie Top Secret and everything. So I wanted to get that vinyl. A couple other things I wanted to pick up. I'm not kidding. If I could have taken video, I would have. But the problem was I couldn't even get a parking space. I mean, there was nowhere to park. There was nowhere to, and it's like, if you had seen what I'd seen, there was a line. I'm not kidding. Like, we're talking like at least 2 miles out the door. And, like couldn't get in. I didn't even go in because there was no point. I would have been there all day just waiting to get inside the door and all this stuff. So I did go later in the evening, and that record store was practically almost cleaned out. I went in there was nothing. And so it's just, to me, it's like, I don't buy that anymore. And I'm seeing it too. It's not just, you think it's like maybe guys our age, they're the ones buying this stuff. No, I'm seeing the other day, I went into the record store and I picked up a couple of CDs, and I started talking to this girl. She had to be at least like 20 years old. And she had a stack of vinyl in her hand, and she had a couple of DVDs with her. And we just started talking about music and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, that would kind of be my advice, is if people are still like, oh my God, is physical media going to come to an end? Let me put it this way. If it's going to come to an end, it's definitely not anytime in the near future, because this stuff is selling. People are still buying it. I'm seeing little kids who, like, I go into these places and stuff, and I'm seeing little kids running around, they got, Disney DVDs or Blu-rays or stuff. And mom, can I buy this? Can I buy this? It's going down to the younger generations. So that would be just my thing. It's like, next time, when somebody's posting videos or like, oh my God, is this it? Is physical media finally dying out? It's like, don't believe it. It's not going to happen. Not for a long, long time. I think the worst thing that's going to happen is we're going to have slumps, kind of, peaks and valleys where, for a while, physical new stuff is coming out, all kinds of new stuff to buy, everything else. But then we're going to have kind of like a downtime, kind of a slump for a little bit where it just seems like nothing's coming out or whatever else. But I take it now as just like, what, when we have those slumps, it's not because they want to stop doing it. I think it's just because they're planning more stuff to put out, or they're looking for stuff to put out. So that would just be my advice. Like, you keep seeing those thumbnails on YouTube, and take that stuff with a grain of salt. Don't read too heavily into it. Physical media is not going to die out for a long, long time. If it does, it's talking like years and years down the road before that ever happens.
Let's be honest. You go on to like Reddit or whatever, there are subreddits for like, CD collectors, and it's like all like kind of young people who are just getting into collecting CDs, and like they're showing off their collections of like, maybe like 50 CDs, and they're proud of it and everything. And that's kind of cool. I mean, looking at it like from my point of view, it's like, like I'll show off my collection like 1,000 CDs or whatever. It's like, but then again, we're older, we've been doing it for years, but
well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I was just,
you're getting into it.
I was just in my son's room tonight. I mean, his shelves are getting pretty full of movies. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff that, I mean, I don't even have. I mean, that. I mean, I just watched Nosferatu and Longlegs because he has them both in his collection. I don't even have them in my collection yet. But, so, yeah.
Oh.
Glenn, got anything new? Well, I was going to say, Glenn, you got anything new that you've done recently?
Video wise, I've had done 2 videos recently. One was a unboxing of a Judas Priest CD box set, and that went really good. And actually, about a week later, I did the follow up, which was an unboxing of a Black Sabbath CD box set. They're both from China. I know they're complete gray market releases, but I don't care. I both Judas Priest and Black Sabbath, I have given enough money over the years to these bands, buying different releases or whatever. I just wanted nice box sets of all the recordings, sort of thing. And I got it for Sabbath. Judas Priest, not quite. They didn't have on the 2 the Ripper Owens albums, but that is what it is. But I always find it weird when a band doesn't, acknowledge like certain years of their career. I mean, those years led to what you are now, so it always seems a bit weird to me. But yeah, I found both box sets for like one was 60 and the other was probably about like 70 maybe. You know, an entire well, the priest one was right up until what was it? Nosferatu, not Nosferatu, Nostradamus. It was right up, yeah, it was the Nosferatu.
Well,
No,
we
it
just
was
spent about an hour or so talking about Nosferatu. So
true that. No, yeah, so right up to Nostradamus, I think it was, or maybe even a bit further. I don't know. But the Sabbath one was right up to and including the end. So that was kind of neat considering it's like gray market or whatever. It did come with 2 CDs and a Blu-ray of the show, so I'm down for that. And it's nice to have a box. I'm a sucker for boxes, and that's what I've done recently. I'm in the midst of moving, so it's been like I can't really do like a vinyl update or anything because all my records are down at my apartment. So hopefully within the next like few days, I'm probably gonna be moving in on Monday. So in the next few days, we'll get some more videos out. Hopefully, yeah.
I think I've just put out the latest Walking Dead one. I think Pretty Much Dead Already, I think was the title. I think that's the one where Sophie comes out the barn at the end. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Poor Herschel. Just watching his family get wiped out there. Well, his family, but that was pretty. And then the latest X-File. And but today, or not today, yesterday, I wrote up my piece for Return of the Jedi for Letterboxd. So I've done one for the whole trilogy now for New Hope, Empire, and really just remembering, going to see them when I was a kid and stuff. But so other than that, all right, Halloween. Good.
Here's a question. Are you going to go see the theatrical Revenge of the Sith that's out right now?
Yes. Going with my brother-in-law and his son. I'm taking James and Max. Max, he about died when I told him we got tickets to go because that's his favorite Star Wars movie. And of course, he was too young to catch it on the big screen first time through, so he'll get to see it now. So he is jacked up. I mean, he cannot. He's counting every day. He's like 6 more days, 5 more days. I mean, he's like, yeah. So we're gonna see it on that Sunday afternoon on the 27th, I think. So
nice.
I kind of wish it was like, I don't know, an extended cut or something. A little bit, extra in there, but
yeah. Hey, good Star Wars is, few and far between right now. So take it where you can get it.
Yeah. So yeah, we are going to see it, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, but on the 26th, I want to say that's Saturday. There's a theater down in Atlanta running a Lucio Fulci triple feature.
Oh.
House by the Cemetery. House by the Cemetery, Conquest, Zombie.
Oh.
I've seen Zombie already, and I haven't seen House by the Cemetery. I just wish they would have picked the Gates of Hell trilogy. That would have been a no-brainer. I'd have gone for that easy, just to see City. But I don't know. We'll see if I decide to pull it off at the last second. But it'd be kind of weird to see Conquest on the big screen. But
yeah, that's a bit of a strange combination.
It is a weird combination.
Yeah. I mean, I get Zombie. I get, House by the Cemetery. But Conquest is kind of, I don't know. That just seems right out of left field. It's like,
Well, you know, Cat in the Brain was my first Fulci movie on the big screen, so
Mm.
I guess it would make sense to go see Conquest, but I don't know. We'll see. That's on the 26th, so I don't. I keep getting it pop up in my feed. It's like putting a guilt complex on me or something. And it's like every day it pops up in my feed.
no,
The Atlanta Film Society is putting on the Lucio Fulci triple feature.
you're
You
like,
haven't got your seats yet. So we'll see.
Now I have a question for you, Rob. Now that I think about it, you're trying to see, Fulci movies on the big screen and everything else. What about New York Ripper?
Would I see it on the big screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably by myself, but yeah, I would go. I would go.
Because I
Well, when I
remember
say by myself, I mean I wouldn't take my littles with me, but
I should
For
hope
anybody-
not. I mean,
for anybody who doesn't know, years back, several years ago, I kept going after Rob the whole time. It's like, you like Fulci, New York Ripper, New York Ripper. I kept going after him and everything else to get him to watch New York Ripper, and he finally did.
and I picked up on a few interesting little insights in that thing that I.
Mhm.
Which you know what is I'm glad you mentioned that because I just in the last 2 days I've gotten 2 random reply or comments on videos. I swear they're freaking 10 years old or something. All I can do is hit the like button and because I can't remember what I even said in those reviews. One was like on a Space 1999 episode review or whatever I did. I mean, it's the weirdest thing when someone comments on something that's like 10 years old and you can't even remember reviewing the thing and you're reminded, oh yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good.
yeah, just thumbs up.
Did I say that?
I don't know, but I do remember reviewing New York Ripper. Yeah, that was an interesting watch.
I was just
Yeah.
like, couldn't help it for the longest time. I was just like, because everybody who knows Fulci knows that New York Ripper is his just sleaziest, dirtiest, filthiest movie he's ever made. And I was just like, I really wanted to know Rob's opinion on it. I
Well,
wanted
what
to
did you
get
think?
his take
What
on
did you think of my opinion? That you
I
remember?
liked it. I had a lot of fun with it. I haven't it, on YouTube. I have it saved on my favorites. I still watch it every now and again.
Really?
So,
Well, yeah.
I was a
And
little
I laugh.
traumatized from that viewing. That was fun though. That's something that we ought to do a podcast someday. Match up New York Ripper with something. Oh my gosh.
Hell, Maniac.
Maniac. Oh yeah.
They
Nice,
cross
yeah.
over in the comics.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
On my channel, every once in a while I do like an original versus remake. I just did one on Last House on the Left. I need to get around to Maniac. I need to do that
Oh
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maniac's one of the few where I actually really like the remake.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm not
The
gonna
head
say I like
scalping
it.
scene is insane.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna say I
Well-
like it more than the original, but I will say it's right up there. I would say it's equal.
The thing that surprised me, I remember when it first came out, I was like, "Oh my God, you remade Maniac!" And, oh God,
Yeah.
Elijah
With Frodo.
Wood, and all that, and all
Exactly.
that stuff. But then what surprised me is when I found out that they said the thing about Elijah Wood is he is a huge horror fan.
Yeah.
He is a
Yeah.
big horror nerd. He loves horror movies and everything else, and he adores Maniac. And like his whole thing about doing it was he wanted to pay tribute to the original movie. He wanted to honor Joe Spinell's character, and like he had
Mhm.
said, that he wished that Spinell was still alive because it would have meant the world to him to get Spinell's stamp of approval on the way he did it and stuff.
Yeah.
When I heard that, then you watch the movie, it's all like, wow, okay, yeah, I was blown away by it. I really
Oh, yeah.
was.
Definitely.
So
Such a good movie.
yes. And yeah, Elijah Wood hit it out of the park. I thought he was I remember even hearing, some on YouTube that, were extremely worried, because of their love for the original, but then seeing Elijah Wood, pull through was quite impressive. Well, his company was one of the two companies that gave us Color Out of Space.
Yeah.
By Richard Stanley. So, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, do we need a synopsis for these two movies?
You would think very much.
I don't.
If anybody's listening,
I mean, there's a chance. There is a small chance that someone out there might not have ever seen one of these two movies.
Some person living under a rock for the past 37 years or something who's never seen Halloween 2 and Kills.
Okay.
But
Just real quick,
go for it.
anybody, if you've never seen Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2, do yourself a favor. Give yourself a treat, a reward. Watch Halloween 2. You won't be disappointed. You will enjoy it.
And if I say anything negative about Halloween Kills, I did see it in the theater, okay? And I bought it, and I got the trilogy. I saw the whole thing in the theater, so I earned the right to be critical. So, anyways, the 81 Rick... Huh?
No, I was just going to say, well, Rob, I think right now, if there's going to be any criticism you're going to have, it's not going to be about Halloween Kills. It's going to be strictly on Jamie Lee Curtis.
God.
Yeah.
You guys don't know it. Before we start recording, Rob let us know some thoughts he had on Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I put my poll up that no one responded to about.
Hey, I voted.
Yeah, I know. I think 5 people. I guess nobody does polls anymore. I was really hoping that would have, but I guess everyone knows the truth and they don't want to admit to it. So anyway. Yeah, picking up exactly where the first film left off. I'm referring, of course, to the original masterpiece of terror by John Carpenter, the original Halloween. Halloween 2 follows the same ill-fated characters as they once again encounter the knife-wielding maniac they thought had been left for dead. It seems the inhuman Michael Myers is still very much alive, out for more revenge as he stalks the deserted halls of the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. As he gets closer to his main target, Dr. Loomis, of course played by the great Donald Pleasence, discovers the chilling mystery behind the crazed psychopath's actions. Written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, Halloween 2 is a spine-tingling dark ride into the scariest night of the year. Funny, Halloween Kills. The Halloween night when Michael Myers returned isn't over yet. That's why we're covering this. Michael manages to free himself from Laurie Strode's, that is Jamie Lee Curtis's, trap to resume the ritual bloodbath. Love how they pick these words. As Laurie fights for her life from injuries from her last encounter with Michael, she inspires her daughter, Karen, granddaughter, Allison, and of all, Haddonfield, to rise up against the unstoppable monster. The vigilante mob then sets out to hunt Michael. Did they really set out to hunt him down?
Kind of.
Well, I guess they do in a way. Yeah. And once and for all, wow, we had to put this in here. Evil dies tonight.
Yep. I'm gonna say you can't talk about Halloween Kills without Halloween. Evil dies tonight.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a neat place to start. So we talked earlier about Justin Beam. I listened to a really nice interview. Justin Beam has his own podcast, and on episode number 34, John Carpenter on Halloween and the entirety of the franchise, Justin Beam does. And if you don't know Justin Beam, he is one of the creative influences behind the Scream Factory release of the Halloween 10 film set. He's the one who had his hands on the anniversary documentary that preceded the 40th anniversary release of Halloween. He's got his hands all over this junk. He's on the commentary track for 4 and 5. Anyways, he's in Halloween. I mean, in terms of the product that we have out there. But he interviewed John Carpenter, and at the tail end of the interview, John said something. This is the first time I have ever heard John Carpenter say this, and I think it's a great place to start considering what Halloween 2 really is and what Kills isn't, I guess. Um, Justin Beam asked him, do you think creating the sibling robbery or the brother sister thing was a mistake? And without even a pause, he said, no. He says, my mistake was I didn't develop it enough, and it should have been developed better on. I had never heard him say anything remotely like that in terms of the creation of, well, if we got to do a sequel, which he did not want to do. I mean, if you listen to that interview, I mean, in the end, it was about a paycheck for him, which is about anything for John anymore. But I was impressed. I mean, I was really sort of impressed. And, and he did that footage, the extra footage for the NBC release of Halloween, but he did it also with Halloween 2 in mind, knowing that he was writing Halloween 2 and Rick would direct it, but it would help serve as a bridge to that reveal that we are going to get in that movie, that they were in fact brother and sister. And so, if you got the 4K of Halloween, there's that TV footage in there. And there's that one scene in particular where Loomis comes to the hospital after he's already broken out and his room is destroyed, and which it's funny because John is like, he is not impressed at all with the footage he shot. I mean, he's just, I wasn't into it. I didn't want to do it. And I was sort of, forced into it. And I, really hated that it was crap. I actually like that footage. I mean, it could have been maybe better if he was a little bit more inspired and his heart was a little bit more into. But I mean, when you listen to Loomis, in that hearing, pleading with them not to, to put him in a maximum security prison. And then you see Loomis go down the hallway and go into Michael's room, where that boy is sitting, and, with his, you fooled them all, haven't you? But not me. And then later on, of course, he's in that destroyed room, and the door the nurse closes the door to show him that he has written sister on the door. And so, these scenes help bridge us into that, that review. But also, too, I thought was interesting was in that scene, the nurse specifically tells him that he had unlocked all the doors and let the inmates out. And I think she even says that it took them forever, but they finally found one somewhere in the town somewhere. They had actually found one. And I thought that was interesting considering what happens towards the end of Kills.
Oh yeah.
Right. And even Zombie in Rob's Halloween movie, a deleted scene, we see Michael unlocking the doors, which is interesting. So I guess a twofold thing to maybe segue off of is, the fact that John didn't think it was a mistake, apparently, to create this. He just thought it was never developed. And yet in Halloween 18, they purposefully try to discard it and pretend it never was, which sort of flies or, against, well, at least what I heard on that interview. And then this idea that no one has ever really capitalized, or they could have in Kills, but these inmates having been released, it's just funny how no one has ever really done anything with it. And Kills would have been the perfect moment. Once they're off that bus at the end of 18, how great would it be to set chaos in motion? You have all these inmates, and they don't all have to be killing people, but you just got a bunch of nut jobs wandering around town, scaring the freaking shit out of people just because they're loons and they don't know any better. Yeah, and it's like just a terribly missed opportunity.
It is. True.
And and it's like Justin said to John, it's kind of weird because that sort of creation of that link of brother sister really took the franchise to some weird places. But it's almost too bad, that with the new trilogy they just didn't sort of anchor themselves down and somehow develop that further in a better way. instead
Yeah.
of just trying to discard it by the wayside. And yet the whole 18, it still feels like they're brother and sister through the
It
whole
does.
thing. It's almost kind of like, what was that for? I mean, you got that theme plugged in there with the two's like, well, hey, weren't they brother and sister? Oh no, they was just rumors or town talk or
Well,
whatever.
like, years later they talk about, like, yeah, that was a mistake. They never should have made them brother and sister and stuff like that. But you know, I'm actually glad that they did. I'm glad that it did go in that direction because I think all of us horror fans, like, if they had never done that, one thing I think it's possible we never would have gotten introduced to Danielle Harris because I
True.
mean her character in Halloween 4 and 5, she's Laurie's daughter. She's the niece of Michael Myers. And so, in those movies, Laurie is, dead, you know, but
Mhm.
so his thing is like, I can't go after my sister, so I'm going to go after the next person, her daughter. And I think, like, I'm glad that, like Carpenter may have regretted it at some point, or the people, like people, yeah, that was a stupid idea. I remember hearing that at one point, Quentin Tarantino, in an interview, he was talking about the Halloween movies, and he said he thought that was the worst idea was
Yeah.
to make, Michael and Laurie brother and sister. But I've always been pleased with that because it's like, you think about it, it's like, what if they didn't do 4 and 5 the way they did, and we wouldn't have gotten introduced to Danielle Harris the way we did.
Mhm.
We would have lost one of our greatest scream queen horror actresses. We may never have gotten her. So I think just for that alone,
Yeah.
it's like it's worth it. It's
And
worth it.
without that, we wouldn't have gotten her as Annie Brackett in
Exactly.
Rock's 2 movies, which I mean, I think in H2 she is phenomenal, and Scout
Oh,
is
yeah.
phenomenal, and Brad Dourif is freaking phenomenal. And we can debate Malcolm's character, but the core group there are pretty phenomenal in terms of the aftermath of that event, which
Mhm.
it's interesting because that does play a semi-important part throughout the franchise at given moments, whether it's in Halloween 2 where you got the mob outside the house throwing stones through the windows and everything. And then of course you got the vigilante mob that chases him down in 4 and drops him in that well, and of course then
Mhm.
and then of course to a bigger degree, you've got Kills and the mob that, you know, unknowingly chases down, that escaped inmate, which every time I see it, I have a harder and harder time buying it. I don't know
Mhm.
what you guys think about that ultimately. I mean, did you buy it at the end? How?
You're talking about the end of Halloween 4 where he falls down the well
No,
and stuff.
no. Kills when that
Oh,
inmate ends up outside the window and ends up jumping. Just that whole.
yeah, I do it. I thought that was definitely that was kind of a weak point there because it's like the thing is like earlier in the movie, I remember when I rewatched it earlier in the movie when they're sitting in the bar and the news story comes on, they show Michael on the TV on the newscast.
Yeah.
So it's like, and you see, and then you see like he's short, kind of like a deformed Danny DeVito almost. You see that guy, and it's like, how did you mistake this guy for Michael Myers? They showed you what he looked like on the TV. How did you even come to the idea that that was him? I get it. The idea is supposed to be like the mob is so worked up and out of control that they just want to get somebody, that they kind of lose their heads. They just want to get somebody, they want somebody to pay for it. But still, it's just kind of like, come on, man. You guys, yeah, that to me was kind of a weak spot in the movie. I will admit that.
What do
I
you
mean,
think?
it's one of the most brutal deaths in the movie.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, like, I get what they were going for. I think they could have done a bit of a better job with it. What I would have done, like, this is just me. If I was doing it, I would have made the guy more closer to what Michael looked like, his size and everything. Like, there's no way you could confuse these two. But
Right.
you know, if say you had someone that was, you know, about Michael's size, you know, about, maybe has like a bit of a limp, then they could say, you know, like, oh, you know, like, well, he was injured back in the, you know, in '78 or whatever, you know, like that's why he's limping now. And like this guy, have it closer. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, here's one thing that I don't get: why, like, literally, Laurie Strode is in that hospital. She knows what Michael Myers looks like. You know, like,
yeah,
he's up there. It's like, hey, bring Laurie over here.
Yeah.
Is that Michael? Like, no. Oh, okay then. I mean,
She probably would have. She would have taken one look at that guy. She would have been like, "Seriously?
like,
You
yeah,
think
you
this
think
is Michael?
that.
Seriously?"
Yeah. I mean, I like kind of the idea that, you know, it's the idea of showing that the like the madness of the mob has kind of spread, and because like it could be argued that some of the people there that were literally just going along with the mob.
You
They
know
they,
what?
they never saw that TV report or anything. They just know someone has said that's Michael Myers.
You know what have made way more sense though?
Mhm.
You have the bus accident, and you got all these inmates who are just, wandering around Haddonfield. You could have easily written just one or two sort of catalyst moments that would have sent a mob into action, and they would have, just been going after these, inmates that are just wandering around town. Would have made way more sense than how, they write it for that hospital scene. Because there was a real genuine threat, or at least in the sense of, you've got these escaped convicts, loons, whatever, they're just out there. And aside from knowing they're out there, I don't think, besides that one character that, ultimately ends up jumping from the edge there, you don't get any accounts of the rest of the
No,
escaped Dewey. I don't
no.
think.
Nope.
I
It,
mean,
it's
Don't
it's
hear anything about it. No.
yeah, it's
I,
a missed opportunity. I think that you really could have done something.
something they should have brought up was the fact that, you know, they never really brought this up, but they should have made a point of it. Like, even if it's not Myers, he's still an escaped convict from like a maximum security, you know, like nut house essentially. So, you know, essentially have one group of the mob be like, you know, doesn't matter if he's Myers. You know, this person is a threat. Now the threat's been dealt with.
Yeah, it just seems so anticlimactic when it's over, and then you have this whole, you know, self-reflection moment where suddenly now everyone, oh, we've become monsters. He's turned us into monsters. And
It's like he hasn't turned anybody into monsters. You've turned your damn self into a monster.
And the worst of that whole entire thing is poor Charlie Cyphers. His character, I thought, was absolutely destroyed in this movie. I think he might have been the worst. I mean, to watch him in 1 and 2 and to see what they did with his character in this one, and I don't know. I don't know.
Well, okay, I was gonna say that, until Rob brought that up, I was gonna ask, like, did anybody feel that, bringing Sheriff Brackett back and bringing Nurse Marion back, did anybody feel like that was just pointless?
It was pointless.
Like,
I thought it was pointless.
I mean, especially
Well,
Nurse
They
Marion.
didn't do
I mean,
anything with him.
the point was to kill them.
Killer, so you
The
know,
point was to I think to make it that like
yeah, it's fan service, but
it's
yeah.
fan service, but also to you know how there's always the thing. It's like there are certain characters that are going to survive.
Mhm.
You know, I think the whole idea was like with that, you bring them in. It's like you assume they're going to be those sort of characters.
Well, that was the thing. I thought the idea was going to be like, okay, well, you know, okay, instead of Brian Andrews, they got Anthony Michael Hall to play Tommy Doyle. You know, you brought was it Kim or Kyle Richards to play Lindsay?
Kyle Richards.
Kyle Richards.
Right.
You brought Lindsay back. You brought Tommy back. You brought Sheriff Brackett, Nurse Mary. I thought the idea was going to be like, okay, they're bringing them back to set them up for something big going into the third one. Halloween Ends, but then you saw that, it's kind of like, okay, that just kind of felt pointless. I mean, like Lindsay is in Halloween Ends for maybe a couple of minutes. It's about it, but I don't know if you guys saw. I love the if you get on Facebook, there was the meme. It was the picture of Chevy Chase and Anthony Michael Hall from Vacation, and you got the word balloon, and Clark says, Russ or Evil didn't die tonight, did it, Russ?
True.
Yeah.
And
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Anthony Mike Hall as an actor, but I mean, if you think about it, when you watch that movie, literally 90% of his dialogue is just saying "Evil dies tonight." That's just about all of his lines, So
I hate that. Honestly, I the thing with that is you can tell exactly what it was that inspired that. It was people. When what's his name died, that guy, that cop stood in his head. I can't remember his name. Black guy.
Yeah.
Oh, what's his name? Yeah, you know who I mean.
Yeah.
And like everyone was going around saying like I can't breathe, as like I guess almost like a rallying cry for justice or whatever. You can tell that that's what that was supposed to be, but it comes off as so disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
It comes off as, cheesy.
Yeah.
Honestly, if he'd said it once, that would have been fine. If he'd been like in the hospital and he'd been like, just like, what, like Evil dies tonight, and they all head out, that would have been fine. It was the repeating again and again and again that made it a meme.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took away any of the seriousness to it because you see exactly what it was for, what the reference was, and it's just it comes off as hollow.
Yeah. I think there's a real marked difference between Kills and 2 in the sense that 2, the original 2, comes across as something, they're playing it very straightforward in the sense that you take all the characters serious in who they are. I mean, Bud is your comic relief in that, but I mean, Bud's a funny guy, he's he's supposed to be funny, right? But everything is I mean, it's a straightforward, it's just a straightforward, it's a sequel, but it's it's where it just Kills just doesn't, I don't know, it's hard to take anything serious. It's like the one scene that is so like in 2, you get that great moment where he goes in the house, the old couple's in there, of course, the old guy's in there watching Night of the Living Dead or something, and she's making him a ham sandwich, and I love how the camera turns and you just see Michael behind, just kind of when the news reports on, and you can tell he's just listening, and then he leaves and he goes out, and then in Kills, the total opposite of that scene is the couple in there with the drone.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And the only redeemable moment in that entire scene for me is I thought how they choreographed Michael repeatedly stabbing with a new knife the guy. I thought just how they choreographed it was that might have been the best. I thought that was the coolest look for Michael in terms of sort of that's the closest you could have maybe come to the first time we ever saw him tilt his head in the original movie, because it just had a creepy vibe to how he just moved.
Mhm.
But everything else about that scene was just horrible. I thought. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think that's where you have the whole two take place in a hospital for the most part. The whole kills. I think it would have been so better if you never even saw the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, let the town be your playground. Let the whole town be your playground.
Yeah. It's like another thing. Well, it's like going back to, it's like I think they dropped the ball on is like one thing they could have really done. And I think it really would crescendo really nicely in Halloween Ends. Is like I said, do more with Tommy and Lindsay and Brackett and Nurse Marion, because like you could have made them into this group, and it's like really you could have gotten the audience behind all of these characters. I mean, we know it's Halloween. The final showdown really needs to be between Michael and Laurie. We know that.
Yeah.
But I mean, like one scene I thought was beautiful, and they could have built on that, was the part where Tommy goes into Laurie's room and they're talking, and Tommy says to Laurie, you watched over me and protected me when I was a kid. Now let me watch over you. Let me protect you. And like have them turn into this team. And it's like I think that would have worked really well if they followed on with that, built these characters up and move them into the third movie. And it's like, I mean, ultimately it would still have to come down between Laurie and Michael, but to have the other characters as great supporting characters. And you could include Allison and Karen. It's like, I mean, I get the idea with killing Karen. The idea is like something to really propel you to get you to want to see where it goes next. But still, it's like, I just really do. I think they dropped the ball, because I think in Halloween End, I think that could have been great. You could have had this team of people out there watching for, Michael and then Corey Cunningham and stuff like that, and the one thing I'm sorry, but it's like I really have what was the cop, the one who ended up in the Hopkins, yeah, the one who ended up with Laurie and stuff like that.
Is it Will Patton that plays him?
Will Patton, yeah. I remember, like, recently when I rewatched, Halloween and then Halloween Kills, I was like, how the fuck is this guy alive? God damn! Not only did Sartain stabbed him, but he ran over him with a cruiser, and yet he's still alive. I had a really hard time believing that. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it just seemed. I was like, no. It kind of seemed like the idea he was going to make sure that Hopkins was dead. Now he stabbed the guy to death, but he ran him over with a cruiser. But okay.
I mean, the thing is, like, let's be honest. Even if he did survive and was in hospital, he would be in like traction.
Yeah, he would be paralyzed. He'd be in a wheelchair.
I don't think he would be having conversations.
No. He'd be like blink once for yes, twice for no sort of thing.
And too, one of the misused, I think the most underused, I guess, the most underused character in the entire trilogy, easily hands down, has got to be the head sheriff guy, the black guy with the cowboy hat on.
I was totally expecting like a Creighton Duke type character,
Yeah, and for all this talk of freaking diversity and everything else, he could have been a major character, and he could have been your new Brackett guy, the guy who becomes the guy who hunts him down. And it just like they always kept him at arm's length distance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I never understood why. He comes across as a really solid actor, that just had a great performance waiting, but he was, talk about not being given anything. He wasn't given anything.
No.
I mean, could you imagine like how cool that would have been if you had him and Brackett team up and being like almost like a Riggs and Murtaugh kind of duo or something like that? Like, think how cool that would have been, you know?
Mm.
Like the two of them going out there, you know, like what, you know, going back to what Rob said, you know, like you could have really, you know, done something with the idea of, you know, all the inmates, you know, like not just Michael, but you could have had inmates, you know, all over terrorizing the town of Haddonfield. Could you imagine those two out there kicking ass and taking names? How cool would that have been? You know?
Yeah.
These two guys out there, you know, doing all kinds of stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think me and Sam were talking about this not too long ago. I thought, you know, I almost kind of wish they would have used, in a way, maybe I almost kind of wish they would have used H2O as a, like, that had actually happened.
Mhm.
And this is Laurie's character evolved from that. If you want to ignore anything, ignore Resurrect, you know, ignore what came after, but just that movie. Because quite frankly, I thought her character in that movie was way more believable than her character in, at least in the first two movies. I actually thought her character in Ends was way more believable in that whole, you know, that's kind of the Laurie you, I don't know. It just, she just feels, she comes across more natural in Ends.
That Laurie in Ends was the one that should have been in Halloween, the 2018, and she should have been pushed through the events of Halloween and Halloween Kills to become the crazy gun nut, you know, survivalist that she is in the 2018 one. She should have been that in Ends, if that makes sense.
No, no, exactly. And you know, it would have been great if the Laurie we got in the opening moments of 18 was the Laurie we see in the beginning of Ends.
That would have been perfect.
If the trigger or the catalyst is suddenly she hears the report that Michael is being transferred, and that's when she decides this can't happen.
Yeah.
And we get the scene that supposedly, at least according to Justin Beam, I heard him on a podcast once, he said he believed that that the scene was there where she ends up running the bus off the road, and she is the one who sets Michael loose on Haddonfield and all those. But then apparently didn't do well with the screening, and so they had to rewrite and they took the scene out. And so all we get is her in the car outside the prison waiting for the transport to happen, and we don't get the rest of that scene. That could have really sent her character off into some crazy places.
Oh yeah.
If she were capable, because, you know, quite frankly, what we get, I think Scout Taylor absolutely kills anything, pun intended, I guess, anything Jamie Lee Curtis does, at least in the first two movies. I really do like her character in Ends. I like what she does in Ends. I like how it's written, and it just, like, after two movies, it's almost like she feels comfortable to flesh that out.
Mm-hmm.
But everything up till Ends just feels so freaking forced.
I think at the end of the day, the biggest draw of Halloween Kills is really like, if you just want a movie with, you know, like if you don't think about the story, don't think about like character development, anything like that, like this is really just a movie. You just want to see Michael Myers kill a lot of people. If that's what Halloween Kills is the movie for you. If you don't give a damn about the story or anybody in it, you know, like I just want to go in there and just watch Michael Myers kill shit tons of people. Halloween Kills is your movie, you know. But it's just, that's the problem. It's like when you start thinking about,
the title tells you exactly what it is. Halloween Kills.
Yeah. It's like, you know, if, you know, you start, I mean, my God, you know, we could be sitting here all night, you know, punching holes in the storyline and the characters and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was the thing, it's like they really, man, I think they kind of, because they knew they were doing a trilogy, I think they figured like, really, we just need a bridge to just get us, between the first movie and the third movie and all that kind of stuff. Because I mean, like, for one thing that makes absolutely no sense is when you watch the extended cut of Halloween Kills, at the very end, when when Laurie gets the phone call and she figures out that Michael killed Karen, her daughter, and she gets out of the bed and you see her like doing that kind of like hero walk out of the hospital, like, I'm coming for you, Michael, and then it ends. Then you go into Halloween Ends, and it's like, okay, it's 4 years later. She doesn't give a shit about Michael Myers anymore. She's an old lady she's a grandma baking pies and all, and it really throws the audience for a loop. You're like, what? Where? Huh? Like that ending set us up. Like, Laurie is going after him. She's going to make sure she gets him. That's where you think it's going to go, and then it's like, and that's the problem. Like, even with some of the great ideas that Halloween Ends had, Halloween Kills really just kind of set that movie up to fail in a number of ways. It really did.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Halloween Kills, the ending of that where they're like beating on Michael and everything, that is how Michael should have died.
Mm-hmm.
That level of violence inflicted upon him, and Laurie should have been there and finished, did the killing blow, and then you could have that scene from Ends where they throw him in the wood chipper or whatever. That's fine, but the thing is, when you think of the 2018 trilogy, is it follows the original three movies almost to a T in a way, because the first one is like your stalk and slash creepy type thing. The second one becomes quite a bit more violent, and the third one goes in a completely different direction. In that way, it did its job fine, but there are issues that could have been resolved with editing, for one. I think certain events happen in the wrong order. I honestly believe that. Like we said, the Laurie from Ends should have been the Laurie that was at the beginning of the 2018. The events of Halloween Ends with Corey Cunningham should have taken place on the night of the first Halloween movie, the 2018, and it should have been like years have gone past. Like by the time we see Corey Cunningham again in Ends, it should have been like, this has been going on for years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just something that can just happen. I don't know. I feel somebody could edit this, take the three movies and edit it into a cohesive storyline that could be really phenomenal. But will anyone do it? I don't know.
Never know. Never know. You have people doing fat edits all the time. So
yeah.
Well, let's take this back to 2 real quick. So you listen to John, and John says, quite often, as far as he's concerned, anything and everything after the original film should have never happened, period.
Mm-hmm.
But because people have to make money,
it
had to happen. So with that being said, 2 is inevitable, because there's no way Yablans and Moustapha Akkad are not gonna, rake in more money after the original, the success of the original film. So, Tommy Lee Wallace drops out. He doesn't want to do it, which is interesting, because John couldn't really understand why Tommy didn't want to do it. It was, it seemed like to him a perfect opportunity for him to, kind of, carry this thing, forward, even if it was unnecessary, carry it forward. So Rick Rosenthal comes in. So, in light of the reveal and the brother sister thing, how do you guys think Rick ultimately did with the entirety of that is Halloween 2?
I think you did great. Honestly, I think it is the best of the original timeline sequels.
I find it pretty interesting that Rick Rosenthal arguably directed both the best and the worst Halloween sequels.
That's true.
He did.
That's true.
To me, I think as far as the sequels go, Halloween 2 is by far the best. That's my ultimate favorite one. I could watch that over and over. But, I think just about everybody all agrees Halloween Resurrection is easily the worst Halloween movie. So I just find that kind of amusing. This, like, you had Rick Rosenthal, who ended up directing both the best and the worst Halloween films in the entire series. I thought, but I like the way he did it. You could kind of see, like, he was going to try to keep it as creepy and spooky, kind of like the original film, but they felt like they were pushed to have to deliver gore because, by then Friday the 13th and, other slasher movies came out. So, you do look, I remember the very first time I watched Halloween 2, and I remember being a little off-put, but I was like, why do you need the blood and the gore? The first movie is so great because you don't really see much, and, it's more about the terror, and it's like the terror and the suspense, and it's like, why you got that here? Why did you really need the gore? And stuff like that. But you get why they did it. But I think altogether, though, I mean, Halloween 2, I think is amazing. Even if John Carpenter isn't really that enthused with it, I still think it's great. It's a wonder. It's, in my opinion, it's one of the best horror sequels ever done.
Yeah.
I think it's just so well made. Carpenter's music is, like that was the thing, as brilliant as his music score was for the first movie, the music score for Halloween 2, like, in my opinion, took it up a notch and everything. And just, I don't know. To me, everything about Halloween 2 works. I don't have any complaints about that movie. I really don't. So.
Dude, the scene when Michael comes out of the darkness with the needle. Oh my gosh, that is. I mean, I think actually John shot that scene because I know he shot a couple scenes in there just to amp it up a little bit. But I mean, does anything remotely come in the entirety of the whole franchise, and would anything and everyone try to do, does anything even come close to the final seconds between Loomis and Michael in that hospital room at the end with the gases all going and then just
no?
I think some people might argue probably the very tail end of Halloween H2O, when after the Laurie steals the ambulance and it crashes, and like Michael's reaching out to her, and then ultimately she takes the axe, slices his head off, and it's supposed to be the end, which of course that didn't happen. But I think that kind of comes pretty close. I think a lot of Halloween fans would say, yeah, I would kind of count that. That would come pretty close.
I always, it always reminds me, the end of Halloween 2 always reminds me of Frankenstein. Like the fire to kill the monster, and it just kind of works. Honestly, like it's one of the greatest sequels ever made, I think. I only have one gripe with that movie as a whole, and that's just the mask looks too tight on the actor. And it is what it is. I'm not. If that's all that's all I can complain about, it's a good day. Because that it's just enjoyable.
I think if there's one thing everybody can say is the biggest gripe about Halloween 2, it's probably Jamie Lee Curtis's wig. Everybody talks about the wig.
That's true. That thing is an abomination.
Of course, going back to real quick, just going back, earlier Rob was talking about the footage that John shot for, the TV cut for Halloween and stuff. Like, yeah, one thing when I watched that footage, one thing I sit there and think to myself was like, okay, you got the three scenes. You got the Loomis talking to the board about keeping Michael in maximum security. And then you got the scene, the aftermath of the breakout. And then you got the scene where, they very well, we need to pay off the whole Linda saying, don't rip my blouse, it's expensive, idiot. So Linda comes over to Laurie's house to borrow the blouse and everything. I remember watching the first time I watched that, I was like, okay, those first two scenes with Loomis, that was John. That scene with Laurie and Linda and all that, it's like, dude, that's got Deborah Hill written all over it. That was Deborah Hill. She wrote that. Yeah. I wouldn't even be surprised if come to find out she probably directed that. Because like that, yeah. Like when you see all the behind the scenes stuff and the documentaries, and you knew like what part, because John always said the original Halloween was 50-50 collaboration, part Deborah, part John, and all the girl stuff and everything, that was all Deborah. So you're sitting there, I'm watching that, I was all like, that's Deborah to a T. I miss Deborah Hill, may she rest in peace, but God, she was such an influential part of those movies. She really was.
Well, John said, John says on an interview with Justin that I listened to, John seemed to make the case that Deborah did way more script writing on the original than he did, but with Halloween 2, he said she did nothing. He wrote the whole thing, even though she's given credit or part credit, co-writing credit. He says she didn't do anything, but she did shepherd the project through as producer, because he was already on prep for the thing.
Yeah.
So he had, he couldn't do anything. I mean, he was busy doing his own thing. And but that scene when Linda comes over for the blouse, I thought, when I rewatched that earlier, it's funny how she comes in a little panicked because Michael's been following her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, and I thought, that's a little creepy. That's a little. I almost wish that would have been in the movie. It's too bad that wasn't in the movie originally, because it kind of links up that scene when when he's driving by and they said something and then he hits the brakes and what, you can't take a joke or whatever. Yeah, I just thought that was kind of. And then of course Laurie brings up the point where he was in his and he was in her backyard. She saw him from the window. Plus, he was outside the school when she could see him through the window. I thought it was interesting how they linked that stuff up though in that scene, and just kind of added a question, as to he's just been following him around, just keeps on following around, and it's just really interesting, the motivation of all that and what was really guiding him, and in spite of what they decide to give the reason and motivation to. If you just look at the first film by itself on its own merit, it is really creepy.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, John Carpenter's contribution to Halloween is, amazing. But it's like, I just feel that does kind of bug me every now and again. It's like, people seem to forget Deborah Hill's contribution to the Halloween movies. And I mean, you think about it, it's like one of the scariest scenes in the original Halloween is the scene where Linda's in bed, the door opens, he's got the sheet on, the glasses and all that kind of stuff. That was Deborah Hill. She came up with that, that was her, John said like, he's like, man, I wish I could take credit, but I got to give Deborah credit. She came up with that, so one of the absolutely scariest scenes in the entire movie was Deborah Hill, and it's like, I'm not trying to be all woke or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like as much as I love John Carpenter as a filmmaker and stuff like that, I'm just saying, like, yeah, we can't forget Deborah Hill's contribution to the Halloween franchise. We really can't,
True.
So if say the hospital scene, there's moments in there that really stand out, pretty iconic, and kills. At least thinking about any moments that do stand out as pretty impressive moments. I mean, for me, the only two things that really stand out, well, the flashback scenes I thought were handled, for how they did it, I thought were handled really, really well. I'm not sure how I feel about going back and rewriting some of the original story and how they did, but how they did the flashbacks was pretty good. But him coming up out of that burning house and then ultimately dealing with that right there, that whole scene with him, the fireman, that might be the high point of the entire movie of kills.
Yeah. You got to admit, even if you don't like the rest of the movie, that part is awesome.
Yeah.
That goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, the thing about Halloween Kills, if you just want a movie where it's just Michael Myers taking people out, this is the one you want.
I just thought of something. Glenn, help me out with this.
Yep.
So in the flashback scene, I think the best part about that flashback scene that I do like, because I do really think it works, is how Michael, even though he kills that one officer, he comes out of the house and he just stands there like he did when he was a little kid with the clown mask on.
Yeah.
He's just got nothing else to give at that moment. He just stands there. But isn't that's how the Zombies work print for Halloween 07 ends? Doesn't he just walk out the door and just stand there?
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if they got their idea from Zombie, because you can look at 18 Kills. I mean, there's so much in there that's influenced by Rob Zombie's 2 movies. As much as they might not want to say it publicly, it's hard not to see it.
Oh yeah.
But I wonder if they didn't get some specific ideas from looking at some of the stuff that didn't make its way into the actual theatrical and extended cut prints. But hey, that was a really neat idea Rob came up with there. Let's take it.
Yeah. I can see that.
I didn't even think about that just the second though, because that is a neat moment when he comes out there and he just stands there, because I don't know, there's something plausible about it. Maybe I mean, in light of all the implausibility that we've talked about Kills, that seems in my mind to work for some weird reason. I'm not sure why exactly. Maybe because he did it when he was a little kid or something. I don't know. He just kind of walks out and stands there and.
Like one thing I kind of wish, this is just my own little thing that I thought about. Like, I know that when they did Halloween 2018, they came out and said, the idea that this is going to disregard, anything after the first Halloween movie, none of the sequels matter, we're starting from scratch, all that kind of stuff. One thing I kind of wish that they had done, I think it would have been kind of cool. This is just my personal opinion. But like one thing I kind of wish they would have done was, like maybe not be so rigid about keeping the other stuff. Because, like one thing that I remember Jamie Lee Curtis saying in an interview was like, this was supposed to be kind of like Halloween, kind of like Halloween in the Me Too era and all this stuff. And, the idea is like, the generations of Strode women, teaming together to fight Michael Myers and stuff like that. One thing this is just my personal thing. I think it would have been kind of cool if they could have brought, Jamie Lloyd, Danielle Harris's character into it. And then, like she's reconnecting with Laurie, like after all these years, because you remember in 2018, Karen talked about she was pulled away from her mother because of how fanatic she was and all that stuff. Like, I think that kind of like, if you really wanted to do something kind of feminist and do this kind of like, as like these generations of Strode women, why not bring Jamie into it? And then throughout the course of the trilogy, you can see Jamie reconnect with Laurie, but also reconnect with her sister Karen, and like her grandniece Allison. I think kind of would have been a cool idea to have bring Danielle Harrison, and you have all of this, and then throughout the course of the 3 movies, they all like that would have been good. That's just my personal thing. I thought could have been good if they had done that, but because God knows Danielle Harris wanted to be part of it. She said time and time again, I'd love to come back and do it.
You talking about the new trilogy or just in general?
No, I was talking about the new trilogy.
Really? I didn't know she wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, she wanted to be. She said, I'll do it. Give me the call. I'll be there. She wanted to be in it and stuff. Like, wouldn't that have been cool? And then even also too, it was like, it didn't have to be Lori, but even bring Scout Taylor Compton in and even if she's not playing Lori, maybe have her play another character who helps the Strode women.
Oh,
Like I think that's just kind of a cool idea, just to do something like that. But no, but Danielle Harris expressed she wanted to come back and all that stuff, and I think that would have been a cool idea to have, and then like throughout the course of the movies, they could have had, like, Mom, why did you send me away and all this kind of stuff, and she could have explained, like, just I sent you away because I just wanted to get you away from this, and I didn't want you to get hurt and all this kind of stuff, and she could reconnect with her sister and all this kind of, and by the end of it, they could, instead of killing Karen, by the end of it, they could have all been the Strode family.
That is
that's just my that would have been something I would have liked to have seen. That's just me.
You know what they could have done? This same principle. You mentioned Scout. Bring her in as a relative of Brackett.
There you go. Okay.
She played Lori in the remakes, and my brain stopped working. Danielle Harris played
Annie Brackett.
Annie Brackett, yeah.
Annie Brackett, yeah.
Yeah. So make it the kind of like in the new one, it would be Danielle Harris playing Jamie Lloyd and Scout Taylor Compton playing like maybe a niece of Annie Brackett, maybe, or like a cousin.
Relative.
Yeah, just do a little swap there, and because they've done it before, recasting actors as different characters, but with still the connection there. I think that would work. It would have been cool. And then,
like I think it would have been kind of cool. Maybe cast Scout is maybe like a relative of Loomis, like Loomis's daughter or something like that, or her granddaughter. Then you could have had her have this kind of character arc about like, she could be like, my father or my grandfather, he was a wonderful man, but this tore him to pieces and it consumed him and all this other kind of stuff. And I want to help stop it because this should not go on. And, look at what it did to him. And, like this should not be allowed to go on to other people. And I want to honor him. And, think of how cool. I think Halloween fans would have gone for that.
Oh, for sure. That's the thing, we love our lore.
Yeah, we do.
And, it can get very convoluted and everything. But do you know of any other continuity that can go in so many directions and the fans keep track? Because think of it. You got the timeline of 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. You have the timeline of 1, 2, 7, and 8. You have the timeline of 1, 18, and kills and ends, and we don't get confused.
No. Then you got Rob Zombie, that's its own thing, so
exactly. And then like yeah.
I think they wanted to,
That's a perfect little segue. I sort of created a quick little it's just because I guess I was bored or something, and but I created a quick little quiz. It's only like 4 varying options. Want me to throw it at you guys real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So it's just called "What's Better." So start here. So just of the options, and maybe 3 or 4 options, just tell me what you think. Clearly, best option out of that grouping. All right, first one. Simply just overall which minor arc is better. You got Halloween 2. You've got the Jamie Lloyd arc, 4, 5, and we'll call it the producer's cut. You've got Halloween 2, H2O, or Halloween 18 Kills, Ends, or Zombies Halloween H2?
That is tough.
I'd say the Jamie Lloyd timeline.
I would probably have to go 1, 2, and H2O.
Fair.
I'm guessing Rob's going to say
Yeah.
Rob Zombies.
You would
Oh, yeah.
you would think that would be my go-to, but the more I think about it, I mean, I really do. Every time I watch H2O, I appreciate that movie a little bit more and more every time I see it, and it is a nice extension of recognizing that two exist, at least from that point. So at least for this one, I actually may just go Halloween 2 H2O. Another one I did was what's more devastating? Here we go. Michael's killing of the firefighters who had just saved him, or Ishmael from 07, or the elderly hermit who had just taken care of him for a whole year, the mountain man guy. 3 options. Which is more devastating? I think that was pretty easy, actually.
Yeah, I'll say 07.
Let's see. Probably go with the firefighters. That'll probably be my pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go.
The one thing I think is funny though is like you brought up the hermit taking care of Michael Myers. That if you ever watch the Boots to Reboots videos, like he was talking about that. He's ranking the Halloween franchise and stuff, and he was all like, "Okay, so this guy takes Michael Myers in, and he's just laying there for an entire year, and he takes care of him. He was diddling him. He was playing with Michael.
I bet he was.
Michael.
Yeah.
It's like you don't let a man just lay in your house for an entire year without you doing something to him. It's like the guy was a diddler. He was diddling him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'll go with those 7 Ishmael. That's pretty devastating. Considering how he looked after him. Best mob: Halloween 4, Kills, or Halloween 2 from 81.
I'll say 4. Simply because I mean they're hold on, I just thought of something. All of those mobs pretty much end up killing someone
innocent.
Yeah. I'll go with 4 though. I mean, there's something about everyone like at the bar and they're like, "Let's go get them."
Mm-hmm.
And going out together, and I think I kind of like that.
I'd probably have to go with 4 as well because even though they did make a mistake and kill an innocent person, like you could tell they were good people.
Son of a bitch! You said you saw Myers. I love that.
Yeah, I'm definitely going with 4 on that one. There's just something genuine about it. It just seems that's what happened. That's really what would happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think this might be the last. No, 2 more. Next one. Best in how it deals with the aftermath. Halloween 2 from 81, H2O, H2 from 09, or 18.
I'm sorry, I'm going with Halloween 2 from 81.
I'll go with H2.
Yeah, I'm H2 all the way.
I mean, the level of devastation that you see from these characters in H2 is so heavy that it's believable.
Yeah.
Like that's what you would expect, like PTSD
Yeah.
to do to somebody.
Annie was the bad girl, and she becomes real recluse. Not that she's a good girl, but she's so recluse and reserved. She's almost the opposite of what she was. And
Yep.
Lori being so reserved is now the opposite of what she was. And when Brackett finds Annie, I mean, that scene has to be counted in the top 3 or 2 of one of the best moments. I mean, you know, Brackett, when Brackett deals with Annie in 2, or is it the end of 1, or is it 2? Is it beginning of 2?
I think it's beginning of 2. Yeah.
And that's pretty. Cyphers does a good job. I mean, just showing that this just can't be real. But Brackett, man, Brad Dourif there on the floor with just oh my God, that is so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think H2 for 09 for sure. But I'll say this though, I do think Jamie Lee really dialed it in way better in H2O than she did in 18. And I think part of that makes sense to me now because John said in that interview with Justin that Jamie is the one who reached out to John because she wanted him to be part of H2O. And he said she was just so excited at just really wanting to revisit that material. And I think that excitement, even though John isn't there, shows, I think, in her performance. And I think her performance in H2O is way more believable than at least the first 2 in the new trilogy. Yeah, that's just my opinion, but I think that's maybe partly it because of how excited she was at the opportunity to try to do that. And I think the Weinsteins greenlit that one, right? That was the Weinsteins then who had ownership. Yeah. John talks about going in and having a meeting with them, and he really didn't get into what was said or anything. He just laughed and he's like, well, you just got to, which reminds me, it's so funny because, Justin was like, well, what do you mean? Well, like what was said and everything. And he really didn't get into it. But Rob Zombie said the same thing when he had his meeting with Bob. He said, I went in there and he's like, Halloween. And Rob's like, okay, what does that mean? What Halloween? What? And it took a while for Bob to, let's do a Halloween movie, and so it's just kind of funny how, when you really listen to these guys talk in interviews for as long as we potentially have, you start to see some weird parallels in, John and his own thing and Rob and his own thing. And it's too bad these guys just can't sit down and actually really enjoy a beer and talk. Cause I'm sure they probably find more in common with each other than they do than they think they might. Last one, I guess, of the entire franchise, single best ending of all the movies, single best ending.
I think I'm probably still gonna have to go with the OG, the original. It was the Boogeyman. As a matter of fact, it was. I think that's got to be my favorite ending out of all of them. Although I know I'm gonna get raked over the coals for saying this, but Tom Atkins at the end of Halloween 3. No, stop it!
I'm gonna go a bit different. I'm gonna go with the ending of 4.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
that is
something about
that ending has no business being as good as it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And shame on them for not capitalizing, for not having the boldness and the courage to go run with it.
Yeah.
Because man, she looks like a freaking monster at the end.
Yeah.
And to wash it away in the next one as much as they do is a shame.
I think also too Danielle Harris. I think she would have been game for that. We've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
her play. We've seen her play vicious and stuff in movies before. It's like you gonna sit there and tell me like she would not, like she would have sunk her teeth into that and ran with it. She would have.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? Thinking about the franchise in its entirety, though, does have some pretty satisfying endings.
It
Yeah.
does.
I mean, three's perfect. I mean, just Tom Atkins there at the end. I mean, I'm sorry, but man, I am completely and absolutely sold out at the end of that movie, and I am with him, man. Just stop. Credits roll.
You guys do notice though how like we've been talking about the franchise in its entirety. You notice we haven't really brought up Resurrection much.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
I think everybody's
Marshmallow
like,
Head
yeah, the less
Myers,
said about Resurrection, the better.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird. I hate the first 10 minutes of Resurrection, but honestly, there are parts of it Resurrection I actually find enjoyable. Not the kung fu part.
Yeah.
I don't find that. But
Okay, so
Resurrection, I kind of had some fun
Glenn,
with
you
it.
sent me the work print on that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually found the work print a lot more interesting than I've ever given any thought to the theatrical release of that movie. The work print is a little more interesting. It's got some really interesting scenes in there.
I always think with Resurrection, there was the potential to be something great. Like, and if you listen to Rick Rosenthal, he talked about it before, but like the original idea with that was when the DVD came out and everything, it was going to be like a branching DVD, really. So the idea was, if you say you were, you could go to any one character's point of view. So the idea was,
I remember that.
yeah,
I remember that.
like you could go to the girl that got killed underground, and like with the rats and everything. After she got killed, you could go back to her point of view and you'd just see it like hanging there. You'd see maybe some rats running around or something. You'd hear other stuff going on like around the house sort of thing, but it'd be a static shot. I liked that idea. I think that would have been kind of neat, but the tech wasn't there at the time to properly do it. And, the idea also, I think, it sets the groundwork for what could have been a really cool found footage Halloween film.
Mm-hmm.
But, that we've never properly got. But honestly, Dangertainment. No. Kung Fu.
I'm sorry.
The Kung Fu wasn't necessary. I mean, I dig that he's a Kung Fu fan, but you shouldn't be Kung Fu in Michael Myers.
The thing I really wish they would have done with Resurrection, instead of killing Laurie off in the first 10 minutes of the movie, I really wish, maybe the story started off, she was in the mental hospital, and then she heard on the news or something like that, they're going to do this live, kind of internet show at the Myers house and all that stuff. And she's like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I got to try to stop Michael and all this. And, she breaks out and she gets to the Myers house and she's going in there trying to help the people in there survive, and have, the showdown between her and Michael and stuff like that. I think that would have been great. That's kind of what I wish they would have done with something like that.
Here's one thing we haven't mentioned at all. Maybe this could be part of our closing moments here. Something was said. Oh, maybe I just picked it up on reading a review or something somewhere along the way, but it was mentioned somewhere that you have that moment in Kills at the end where and it's always mentioned how it seems like there's an allusion to there's just something about that room that he always stared out the window of where he killed his sister.
Mhm.
And it's kind of an intriguing thought, and it's I wonder if it's unfortunate that maybe they never ran with that idea or developed it further. Was it the house that was actually the catalyst, or just the room, or it is they do play with it in Kills, but
Mhm.
they never take it anywhere serious, like most of that trilogy. They just don't. Well, you can say that about the franchise in general on certain points. You flirt with it, but they don't, like Jamie Lloyd at the top of the staircase. Perfect
Yeah.
opportunity, and they just wash it away. You know, the room
What,
that he stares out the window.
what could have worked really well there if like they were talking about they were talking about that, and then just someone mentioned, well, that room has really weird geometry.
Mhm. You could even
Oh,
go Lovecraftian with it. Go Lovecraft
Exactly.
with it, like Dreams in the Witch House or something.
Exactly. That
yeah.
because you're, it would have just been just a
That'd have
little
been an
nod.
awesome line. I wish somebody would have been smart enough to write that in there. That would have
Oh
been,
yeah.
but of
Every now
course,
and then,
even if let's just say theoretically, let's just say that was talked about in a meeting.
Mm.
I'm sure it was followed up very quickly with, "No one's gonna get it. Let's grab it."
and the
It's
thing there, what you say to them there is like, it doesn't matter. Those that do get it will get it.
they'll spread the word fast.
Yeah.
Then
No,
everyone will. I think it's intriguing. I think Glenn, what you said about, I think it was you, maybe Lonnie, um, whoever it was, said that that movie should have ended with the mob beating him to death.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that translates into ends, other than maybe perhaps an idea is, well, Haddonfield, like Laurie is at the beginning of Ends, that's the town. The town feels like it's finally gotten over the curse. They dealt with it, but little do they know, because of a terrible accident, Corey, somehow you just create a way how Corey picks up the mantle of the boogeyman, and
Yeah.
that just sends the town into a tailspin, because they can't even begin to fathom what's happening in their town because they've killed the boogeyman.
Yeah.
That could have been interesting. But
what could have, something they could have done with it, because going back to what you said earlier about, um, you know, how like 2018 kind of mirrors the original Halloween, Kills mirrors Halloween 2,
Mm.
Ends mirrors Halloween 3. It's all like, like what if some way they could have worked in something with Silver Shamrock into it?
I would love that.
Like they could have figured
I
out,
would
like,
love it.
that somehow, like the, because like going back to what you were saying, like they kind of almost hint at the kind of supernatural element of Michael Myers, but it doesn't go anywhere and stuff like that. What if maybe like Silver Shamrock, has has something else under their sleeve besides just the masks. Like
Yeah.
they're dabbling in other areas of witchcraft and warlockism and stuff like that. Maybe like have it connect to Silver Shamrock in some way.
Oh yeah.
and it's too bad, because 18 and Kills, by and large, yeah, those two movies more than the third. There's so much of it is just a shout out to all the little things that make the franchise great,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but it in of itself is not great,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate, because I think part of it maybe is, well, I think two things. One, I think COVID really did play havoc with the
Oh yeah.
continuity structure. So,
Yeah.
you got to give them that, at least. I mean, the benefit of the doubt that perhaps we would have had a better trilogy had COVID not hit. It could very well been. But I also think what really hurt them was, and I don't know how much they really believe this, or how much of it was just public sentiment, but how much angst that we always heard about how we are not going to be Rob Zombie's movies. And yet,
Yeah.
when you look at the level of violence and you look at all the things that, you know, you saw in Rob's movies get emulated in their movies, it just makes you want to throw your hands up in the air and go, what was all that?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
and it's
the
funny
only
because, huh?
No, I was gonna say the only thing you're missing is the gratuitous nudity and everybody saying "pussy fucker" every 3 seconds.
And you know what's funny about that is you know, when you listen to Jamie Lee Curtis on the Halloween Kills commentary, I swear every freaking 5 seconds when there's about to be a kill, she's like, I can't look, I can't look. Why did you do this? Why did you do this, David? Why? I can't do this. I can't look at it. And I'm
Like, shut the hell up.
are we
Yeah.
serious? We spent all of that. We're not going to be Rob Zombie's movies. We're going back to the original. We're going to be the original. No, I'm sorry. In 18, the minute he walks into that gas station stall and starts, and when he steps on the guy's head and crushes it with his foot, I mean, come on.
Oh yeah,
Um,
those are definitely callbacks to Rob's movies easily.
oh, yeah.
But you know what? To play devil's, I mean, devil's after that. I mean, you know, Halloween 2 did something that, you know, that took everyone for a loop, and that is it in of itself really wasn't what everyone experienced in Halloween, and that really, like you guys said earlier, because of Friday 2 that's in development at the time, and they all knew where the slashers were going and the level of violence. And so if anything, Halloween 2 proved that the new slashers, or the slashers that were coming and had come and were coming, was having more of an impact on Halloween 2 than Halloween was having on anything coming after.
Yeah.
Because you lost that. I mean, after Halloween, you never got that again, really.
Yeah.
No.
You know, all you got was, you know, the level of violence just continually increased. And there's, I mean, nothing really wrong with that if it's handled right and there's a reason and a purpose, which I think Rob does not get the credit. A lot of the violence in his movies is with purpose and intent and,
Oh, yeah.
and a reason. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's the thing. If you're a Halloween fan, we could be sitting here. We could be talking about this for days on end. No, just going back and forth.
But you know what? That's a good point to end on, I think, is the fact that this is there is something for everyone in this franchise in its entirety.
Yeah.
Even if you just latch on to one little piece of it, which I think is really hard, but if you do, there's a piece for you to latch on to.
Yeah.
And you can call it your own and say, this is where I'm at.
Yep.
And whether it's the Jamie Lee arc or 1, 2, and H2O, or without H2O, or Rob's movies, or, you know, the latest trilogy, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, there's something for everyone in this franchise.
Oh, definitely.
One thing I'd like, you know, before we get off of here, one thing I'd like to get everybody to remember is the next time you watch season 2 of The Mandalorian, or maybe even season 3, the next time you look at Katie Sackhoff's character on that show, remember, she was the annoying blonde from Halloween Resurrection. Let that sink in.
I don't know if I knew that. I didn't think I knew that.
Yeah, I knew that. That was one thing I thought was funny, was like, Katie Sackhoff is on The Mandalorian. Oh, okay. You know, okay, the loudmouth, annoying blonde from Halloween Resurrection. Okay, she's on Star Wars now. All right. She, you know, if I was to ever meet her in real life, she'd probably be like, "Don't mention that. Shut the fuck up. Don't bring up Resurrection. Okay, you can bring up Ghost of was it Haunting Connecticut 2, Ghost of Georgia. Bring that up, but just don't bring up Resurrection. You know."
True. True.
Well, and for all the criticism we may have leveled here and there or throughout, I think we all own the entire franchise.
Oh, yeah.
And to the very best of our ability, maybe our age was against us, we've pretty much seen most of the movies on the big screen at some point or another, at least a good handful of them if we were able to. Thankfully, my God, I was able to see the original Halloween on its 40th or something.
Yeah.
I got the ticket right here. I don't know if it says it or not, though. It just says John Carpenter's back in 10/29/15.
Nice.
Forever. Yeah, it's physical media matters, right? Even if it's the new trilogy, the old stuff, it all matters. It's
And going
nice.
back to like what I said earlier, don't buy the hype. Don't buy them sitting there. Oh my God, it's coming to an end. Oh yeah, Blu-rays are going to disappear tomorrow. 4Ks are going to be gone by the end of the week. No, trust me, it's not going
And
anywhere.
you know what? Before we know it, Scream Factory is going to have a box set for the new trilogy, and we're all probably going to get it because it's going to have commentaries and everything else that we don't have on these. And
True.
Somebody will get it.
I'll race after him if Justin Beam's on him. Which, by the way, if definitely look that guy up. He's got his own podcast, and he's done so much to help with the physical media aspect of the Halloween franchise, in terms of documentaries as well, and just being part of the commentaries. Interview with John is a great interview, and I think he also has an interview with Irwin Yablans, and he also has one with Dwight H. Little of 4. At least three major Halloween interviews on his podcast. Of course, he's gotten to work with them on putting the commentary tracks and stuff together as well. So, all right, any last thoughts before we jump off of this train?
Watch more Halloween.
Watch more Halloween. Physical
It's
media matters.
always Halloween somewhere.
Yep. And hopefully, hopefully what Glenn and I were talking about earlier, it's like now with, as long as they're good, keep the Halloween movies coming. Just make the stories good, make them entertaining, interesting to watch. I'll keep buying them. I'll keep watching them. But it's like now, now we got Art the Clown and Terrifier. So, hopefully we can, maybe with any luck, we'll start seeing some new horror icons along the horizon.
And Wolf Creek 3. Yeah.
Wolf Creek 3, yeah, it's like, we got Terrifier 4 coming on the way. We had Victor Crowley for a little while and stuff like that. So, yeah, so hopefully, hopefully there'll be some gems that will come along at some point, and we can still cherish and love our horror icons, but we can also, like they say, respect the past and embrace the future. So hopefully we can do that. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, until next time.
All right.
Yeah.
Have a good night.